Good morning, Quad Cities, and a happy Wednesday to you. It is Wednesday, September 17th, 2025, and it is time for Ask Andrew. I want to thank you for joining us this morning. It's kind of a special edition of Ask Andrew Live because literally 2 hours from now, in the next studio over, we get to launch our brand new Look to You coming up on GMQC at 11. If you want a little sneak peek at a little piece of the new set, it's a close-up, but it is a sneak peek. You can head to my Facebook page right now. Just posted that a little while ago. But we're excited to get back into our home right next door. And again, we're going to do that coming up on GMQC at 11. So this may be maybe the final one in this studio for Ask Andrew Live. We'll see. I kind of like the digs here. The nice big screen, but we're happy to have you along regardless. If this is your first time, welcome in. I hope you're having a good week so far. This is the only half-hour streaming show here in the Quad Cities where we talk about everything weather-related. And of course, you get a chance to ask your questions, and I'll go ahead and get you an answer here on the air. If you're curious, how do you get your question to us? There's two different ways. The first way is you give us a text, and that number, if you don't have it memorized by now, it's 309-304-0888. So the end of it's easy to remember, 309-304-0888, and one more time, 309-304-0888. Our fabulous folks on the digital side will relay those questions to me right here on the set. The other way, too, is if you're watching us on social media. So right now we're also streaming this live on our Facebook page, and there's a chat right at the bottom of the stream where you can put in your question, and we'll get to those. So what we'll do is we'll start off with a little weather chat, what's happening in the weather world right now, what's kind of coming up in the future, and then we'll leave plenty of time, about 15 minutes in, to answer your questions and see what else you're kind of curious about in the land of weather this week. We've had some really good questions for the GMQC segments of Ask Andrew this week. In fact, one of them came right from this segment right here, Ask Andrew Live. So we're going to do a little deeper dive into something called the Madden-Julian Oscillation, something you probably haven't heard of. And if you have, maybe you're not too familiar with it. It's also called the MJO for short. We're going to dive into that coming up in just a minute. But let's start with what's going on, and that is the continuation of the heat that we are still seeing across our region. The heat just continues and continues on. We've now had about 4, if not 5 days now worth of 90s for the month of September. It's not unusual, but it definitely is higher than the average of what we typically see. The reason for that is we've had what's called this omega block pattern in place. And what happens is you get two areas of low pressure that develop on both sides of us. You get one to the west, you get one to the east, and then stuck in the middle, we have high pressure and a whole lot of hot air. Now, thankfully, this is not July and it's not August, because if it were, we would be dealing with a lot of humidity and it would be a lot more uncomfortable than it actually is right now. But the fact that we're in September, we don't have access to nearly as much moisture as we did, say, a month or two ago, this isn't all that bad. It's just plain old hot. It's a drier heat that's moving in. But what it has also meant is that we have not had an opportunity to pick up any rain for quite some time. I'll show you the radar here, and this is where the rain has been confined to. It has been limited to areas well west of us, western half of Iowa, also into Nebraska and into the Dakotas. That's where one of those low pressure systems that's just kind of been stuck or stalled out has been for the last several days. And they have picked up not only some heavy rain in this region, but also some severe weather, mainly on the hail side of things. Hasn't been too much in terms of tornadoes. But this low pressure system that's currently over Nebraska, it is going to slowly track in our direction. And as it does, we're going to see a better opportunity for rain here in the Quad Cities as early as Friday morning. I think that's when the first raindrops are likely going to start falling for us. And I'll show you this as we put our future track model kind of into motion. And I'll show you a higher resolution version here in just a second. But I want to show you the evolution of this as we go into Thursday afternoon, now Thursday night, Friday morning. There we go, Friday morning, and now into Friday evening. And you're seeing, there's a couple of these different little waves that are going to be moving through. So what we know right now is when this rain arrives on Friday, it's not going to be an all-day rain. I know we have week 4 of high school football on Friday evening. This is not likely going to interrupt many of those games. I think 1 or 2 May get a little bit of a downpour, perhaps a bolt of lightning from some of this activity coming through later in the afternoon and early in the evening. But I don't think it's going to be a total washout area wide. So that's some good news there. I would still recommend that you bring an umbrella on Friday to the football game regardless. You don't want to be caught off guard with that because these could especially have some of those heavier downpours. But again, as of right now, I don't think we're going to be canceling or postponing a whole bunch of football games as we go into Friday evening. Let's go to the high resolution future track and I'll show you what that looks like here. And a reminder that we get an update to this model right here during this show at about 9:15. So we're going to check in with this again before we leave at the bottom of the hour here. But here's Friday, and what I'm going to show you first is Friday morning. And this has been really, really consistent in terms of the coverage and the timing of some of these showers and thunderstorms. So it is likely going to start here first, Friday morning, areas to our southwest. So Burlington, Mount Pleasant, perhaps up to Muscatine. Kids may be needing the umbrella for the bus stop on Friday. But it looks like as this wave kind of tries to lift northward, we have to remember that it's running into this easterly flow. And you can see that with the wind arrows here, that wind coming right off of a cooler Lake Michigan. It also tends to enhance the dryness of the air as well. So it's going to be fighting some of that. So that's why we think it's going to be later Friday afternoon, Friday evening with this batch right here, that it's going to take that long for at least most of us to see some kind of measurable rain. And even as we get to 5:30, look at how much spacing is between all of this. Lots and lots of dry areas. So again, that's why I think we're not going to see a total washout when it comes to games on Friday. Even into the evening, this is 7:30, there's not much going on. And honestly, as we go deeper and deeper into the evening, you can see we really don't start to flare things up again until we get to about 11 o'clock just before midnight. And by then, everything is done in terms of what you need to do outside. So that is how the rain is looking there. It also looks like we're going to be dealing with some showers and thunderstorms also as we go into the weekend, at times on Saturday and Sunday. But I do want to show you how things are going to be trending as we go into next week, because this low pressure is stubborn. It's going to be slow moving like it's doing right now out to the west of us. And that means that we may start to finally see some sense of some significant rainfall, at least in spots of our region. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause this right at Saturday. So this is the estimated rainfall, our rainfall potential. And no surprise that, yeah, through the start of the weekend, the heaviest rain is going to be confined to right here, where we've got those yellows and those darker yellows, kind of a mustard color showing up. That is about an inch or more worth of rain. But this pattern slowly has to migrate to the east. And as we put this into motion and get this into early next week, and especially by the middle part of next week, as another area of low pressure could potentially scoot up in our direction, notice how that heavier rain is kind of more moving up in our direction. So we're finally getting an opportunity to latch onto some of that moisture next week. And that's exactly what we're going to be needing here, because we're going to start getting ourselves into some trouble if we do not get some rain in the next few weeks. That's going to mean increasing drought conditions, and that is not something that we want to see this time of year, because what we want to do is we want to get as much water storage into the ground before it freezes this winter. That way we're in good shape as we get into next spring in case things stay dry. I'm going to bring up the drought tracker, and we're actually going to show you this kind of on a more zoomed out level so you can see what's going on with drought across the Midwest here. So as I showed you yesterday, we had some pre-drought conditions developing in southeast Iowa. The drought actually exists further downstate, so you got to go down to about Champaign-Urbana, which actually that region is in severe drought right now, just barely. There's a little speck of it you see right there. But south of Chicago towards Champaign-Urbana, that's where you've got some of the heavier areas of drought, especially southeast of St. Louis. North of Carbondale, you've got moderate to severe drought ongoing there, and also in downstate Missouri. So overall, we're not sitting in a terrible spot right now, but if we don't get that rain next week, and we don't get any rain the following week, it's easy to see that that yellow or that pre-drought condition is going to spread further to the north. Now, I know this time of year, too, you want some dry days because, as I saw yesterday during GMQC at 11, the harvest has started. Farmers are in the field. They're starting to harvest. Of course, you can't really harvest when it's raining, but we wouldn't mind a little drink of water or two in the next couple of days. I'll show you the 8-day really quick, and then we'll get to our Ask Andrew questions that we had for GMQC. This week, there were some really good ones, especially the MJO one. We'll get to that in a second. But here's the next 8 days and how those are trending. And you can see here, I'll move my little laptop out of the way, that we've got 80s taking back over by Friday. So as that rainfall opportunity comes in, we will start to cool things down. Now, do I think we're done with the 90s for the year? Can't guarantee it. I wouldn't be surprised if they return later this month. Really, the whole month of September looks warm to me. But at least we're going to get out of the 90s temporarily heading into the weekend and next week. There's also a daily chance for a shower or thunderstorm as well, but these are not going to be widespread by any means. These will be scattered, especially this weekend, and there's going to be plenty of dry hours that you're going to be able to enjoy this upcoming weekend. And that's good because we've got a lot going on this weekend. We've got the Suicide Prevention Walk in Moline. We've also got Fiesta Day going on in Sterling. And I want to remind you, the Beast will be in the parade. That kicks off at 1 o'clock. Believe it's going to start in Rock Falls, and then it will make its way over the First Avenue Bridge, aka Illinois 40, going right into downtown Sterling. So hopefully the rain holds off for that. If it doesn't, well, I'll be there in person and you can blame me for that. But yeah, we're expecting a good turnout and it should be a really good time. Also, before the parade, the Beast will be at the Twin Cities Farmers Market that morning, starting at 8:30. So if you're shopping for some produce and all that good stuff, come on and swing by. I'll be there. Marcus will be there. And with temperatures being cool enough, Cooper will be there as well. And he would love to see you. So let's get to our questions that we had this week. And I really want to start off with the beefier one, because this one, it was a little bit of a challenge to cram it into about 1 minute 30 seconds on GMQC this morning. But this question came from one of our really good friends, and that was from Billy in Clinton. And I promised him I was going to cover this for Ask Andrew this week. So he was inquiring, what is the MJO and how does it impact our weather? We don't really talk about the MJO a lot because it is a complicated process. So we're going to break it down for you here right now, step by step, and I'll show you exactly what the MJO is all about. So it's short for the Madden-Julian Oscillation, and it's named that because that is the group of folks or person that kind of came up with this theory that really brought this pattern, if you will, this weather pattern to life. So what this is the MJO is essentially just another name for an area of low pressure that forms around the equator. And what that low pressure does, of course, like any other low pressure, is you get a lot of upward motion. And that's going to provide you with big clusters of thunderstorms. Now, this is on the equator itself. So you're not talking about things that are going to become hurricanes or tropical storms necessarily all the time. But it is an area of lift where you see a lot of storm development. And all that lift goes into the upper levels of the atmosphere, all that energy, and it can actually impact our weather pattern as far north as the United States. Even though I know it's hundreds of miles to our south, it does impact our weather pattern here. So what happens is that area of low pressure actually circles the entire globe in a period of about 1 to 2 months. It varies, of course, depending on steering winds and a couple of other variables, but it does move, and we're able to track that with model data, and past history as well tells us what this thing does in terms of changing our weather pattern. So this is the week 1 cycle, for example, to show you how this is going to move. So say for week number 1, it's very wet off the coast of South America. Meanwhile, South America, especially the northern half of the continent, is really dry. They kind of develop this drought situation. But the following week, that pattern begins to migrate eastward. And so what we're doing is we're flipping. Now the northern half of South America is wet, and then areas offshore are completely dry. And you can imagine what that does to temperatures too, because remember, weather always correlates back to a temperature difference. So if you're dry, you're obviously going to be warmer, versus if you're wet, you're obviously going to be cooler. So all of this will then migrate around the globe in a period of about 30 to 60 days. And what we do to try and figure out what this thing is going to do, let me go to the next one here, is we look at the model data, the computer model data that is associated with this. Now, I know this is going to be a little bit harder to see, so I'm going to have our folks in the control booth, if we can, take this full screen for me. What you're looking at on the left is what the model data looks like when it comes to tracking the MJO. So the MJO, it has 8 different phases. And again, it's all based on its location. So how you read this graph on the left, the model data, is if you picture yourself standing over top of a globe. Maybe you had one of these in school, the actual globe itself that you could look at and spin and touch. So you're standing over top of that. You're looking down at it from the top. And then this is tracking where on the globe that cycle of disturbed weather or low pressure is going to go. So what it's showing you there is the track since the beginning of the month and actually since the end of August. And right now, we're in phase number 1, which is in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. Then what the models will try and do is tell us, okay, when will we go to the next phase and what phase will it be? Doesn't necessarily go in order. We could go from phase 1 to phase 8. You could go from phase 1 to phase 2. You really don't skip a phase very often, but the phases are never in numerical order. Again, you can go backwards, you can go forwards, but you usually don't skip. So right now we're in phase 1. And each phase, 1 through 8, has historical data associated with it that we use all the time. So for example, we know that when we're in phase 1, this is what we can expect across the United States in terms of temperature. You can see on that map, there's a whole bunch of orange and yellow right over the northern half of the country, while the south and southeast and also extreme northeast have a whole bunch of blue. So that means phase 1 for us, that we're typically going to be seeing above average temperatures, or it's going to be warmer than normal. So this is a classic example of how we can use the MJO to forecast not only what's going on right now, but to forecast what our temperatures and potentially our precipitation, including rain and snow, could do in the future. So phase 1 is obviously spot on right now because it is hot outside. It is abnormally hot. It's not record-breaking hot, at least right now, but this thing is spot on in terms of what's going on with our pattern. So hopefully that helps. Again, the MJO, it is a complicated thing. This was a beast of a question to tackle this morning for the regular segment, but it was the perfect question to tackle right here on Ask Andrew Live. Excuse me. The other question we tackled earlier this week was in regards to the overnight temperature. Why do temperatures continue to fall after sunrise? So I'm going to pull up that answer because this is one that I've done before, but it's a good refresher, especially this time of year as temperatures are cooling off and we're starting to see the amount of daylight get a little bit lower compared to what it was before. So I'll bring this up, and this explains why we see a temperature drop off even after sunrise. Because most of us are probably thinking, well, the sun is up. As soon as the sun comes up over the horizon, we should start warming up, right? Well, that's not the case. If you look at the temperature trend here, which is in red, compared to our sunrise and sunset, which is in yellow, you notice after sunrise, we still have a little bit of a downward curve here. Temperatures are actually falling a little bit. We don't start a quick rise until we get to about 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, so like an hour from now, where we're at now. What is the reason for that? Well, the reason is you need that sun to be at a really high angle in order for a lot of that sun energy to come right down here at the ground. If the sun is at a low angle, most of that energy is directed in this direction. When the sun is at a higher angle, you're directing more of that energy downward toward the ground here. So it's all about the higher sun angle, and that's another reason why we have different seasons around here. We have the highest sun angle this time of year, giving us the most sun energy directed toward the ground. We have the lowest sun angle coming up in the winter, where a lot of the sun's energy just goes right straight across us. Some of it gets to the ground, but not as much as what we see this time of year. So hopefully that helps. Again, those were some great questions that we had this week, and one of those came from right here during Ask Andrew Live, and I want to thank Billy for sending that question in. It was a great one, and he always has some really good ones for us. All right, let's see who we have in the chat this morning. Welcome aboard. 309-304-0888 is the number that you would want to text here if you're watching us on the 8 Plus app. If you're watching us on Facebook, you got the comment section right down here on your phone, and we'll get to those right now. We have Riley with us this morning, and I know there's going to be a joke involved in this, so we're going to get to that. We also have Judy with us this morning. Good morning, guys. Good morning, Paul. We have another question here from, Billy saying, good morning, WQAD friends. First, a huge thank you to Mr. Stutzke for answering my question this morning about the MJO. I truly appreciate it. And secondly, to my question, will severe weather be a potential with the storms we are having coming our way? Thank you for your time, and I hope all of you have a wonderful day. And that's from Billy and Clinton. Thank you very much, Billy. So the severe weather threat is really, really low with this area of low pressure that's going to be coming in. And one of the reasons why, as I kind of talked about a few minutes ago, is it's cut off from the main storm track. So this thing has just been hanging out. It's not really attached to a jet stream per se that could help give it some stronger winds and some stronger lift. So that's why you're noticing, if you look at the radar here, yeah, we have quite a bit of lightning, but we don't have any warnings, and really the thunderstorms, at least their appearance on radar, doesn't look all that impressive. It just kind of looks like your run-of-the-mill, early springtime, late fall thunderstorms that are moving through our region. So as of right now, I'm not anticipating any widespread severe weather, but as we saw yesterday in parts of the plains, some of these storms, if we get enough storm energy, could quickly produce some severe hail with them, but the tornado threat and such would be pretty low with this going into the weekend. So we're going to keep an eye on it. Right now, there's no severe storm zones issued from the Storm Prediction Center. Some of the AI machine learning algorithms are kind of hinting at something maybe here on Monday on a low end kind of threat there. Nothing too exciting right now. But yeah, with low pressure, especially with one that's just sitting and spinning here and not really having a lot of movement with it, it's going to be hard to get any kind of organized severe weather. So I would not expect that heading into the weekend and early next week. That is some really good news there. All right, now I think we have Riley's joke of the week here. All right, asking, what is a meteorologist's favorite kind of music? Can anyone guess? It's heavy metal with a chance of thunder. That's clever. That is so clever. Thanks for the morning pick-me-up, Riley. We appreciate it. Paul is asking, even though we haven't had any rain, how come we are not considered in a drought in Sterling? So that's a really good question. Very, very good question. So we are not currently considered in any kind of drought into the Sauk Valley. You got to go to southeast Iowa. Why is that? Well, think about how much rain that we got last month in August. We had lots of locations, including Sterling, pick up several inches worth of rain. So our water storage, kind of in the mid to deeper levels of the soil, is doing pretty good. It's the topsoil that's kind of dried out completely. So you need more than just the topsoil to dry out to be considered into drought. We're talking about water deeper into the soil, which so far, that's holding its own, thank goodness, because the sun, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, is getting weaker now that we're into the month of September. So if we go a few more weeks without any really significant measurable rain, then we will start getting into that drought status, because the water deeper into the soil is not getting replenished from the top down. So right now it's just the topsoil. A result of that is you're not having to mow as often, and the lawn, at least mine anyway, it's not comfortable to walk on top of barefoot right now. The lawn is very what I call prickly because the grass is so dry. It also is going to be a factor for farmers. They're going to have to be very careful in the fields. It's a heat source with those combines. That could be a fire that could quickly spread out of control. So saw that yesterday. Again, farmers are in the fields, so make sure you're giving them some extra room, slowing down, and good luck to everybody with the harvest this year. Hopefully it is plentiful and everyone is successful. That would be nice to see. Nancy from East Moline is asking, what happened to Indian summer? So we call it second summer now. The official term from the American Meteorological Society, they got rid of Indian summer due to some sensitivity with that. So now we call it second summer. But did we have second summer yet? Technically, yes. This would be considered second summer because we had temperatures drop into the 30s overnight not that long ago. I remember we were tracking that on GMQC. We had many hometowns reaching into the mid-30s. The technical definition of that second summer or Indian summer is when you have a period of above average temperatures after the first frost of the season. So if you want to get really nitty-gritty technical, this would not be second summer or Indian summer, But I think in my mind, mid-30s and a little bit of light frost, not a killing frost, but a light frost. The fact that we've had that, this would be our second summer. So we just don't call it Indian summer anymore. We just refer to it now as second summer. That's what the governing body of weather now refers to that as. But a great question. All right. We have a comment from Michelle saying, glad you had a good time with family. Awesome job. Well, thank you. Yeah, we always have a good time there. You're welcome, Paul, and hopefully I'll be able to see you soon on one of my many trips back home to Sterling there. Riley has another one for us. Prepare for a stumping question. If a microburst occurs over a valley with a temperature inversion, how does the microburst's downdraft interact with the inversion layer, and what unusual surface weather phenomena could result? Oh my goodness. That is a mouthful. That's a whole paragraph right there. Okay, so if we have a microburst that's occurring over a valley with a temperature inversion, so you're dealing with a dip in elevation, which typically means you're going to have cool air near the ground, and if you have a temperature inversion, you're going to have a warm layer of air just above the ground there. And if you're going to have a microburst, that involves a lot of downward motion. The only thing that I can think of is you're going to get some kind of fog situation. That's a lot of different temperature layers that you're trying to cut through. Now, if there was already an inversion there, typically the microburst, in my mind, is going to have problems punching through that. It would kind of weaken it a little bit. But it could change the moisture content. Evaporation could also cause that to speed up as well. That's a complicated one. I'm trying to digest all the physics in my mind. I think you may have stumped me. I might have to think about that one a little bit more. But that's complicated. That is really, really complicated. Great question, though. That is absolutely an in-depth one. Last call on questions. We've got about 3 minutes to go here till we hit the bottom of the hour. Again, this is your half hour to ask your weather-related questions. There's a couple other things we can talk about, too, that have been going on weather-wise. It looks like the tropics are finally starting to wake up. It's been a really kind of quiet year, thanks in part to a lot of sinking motion. We've also had some Saharan dust that's been going over the Atlantic that's been limiting activity. But it looks like things may start turning around here pretty quickly. In fact, the National Hurricane Center is already monitoring tropical depression number 7. This is way, way out in the Atlantic. And you can see where we are here, way over here on this side. So this thing has a ways to go before it starts getting us any headaches here. But like most systems that we've seen so far this season, as this thing kind of travels on and strengthens, and it will likely become a hurricane. And remember that the National Hurricane Center kind of downplays the strength of this. Right now they're calling for a Category 1 by the end of the weekend into early next week. This is Monday at 1 a.m. There you see the Carolinas, again, way in the corner of your screen. But you can see, like most of the other storms this season at the Atlantic, it gets close to the coast here, and that would be something that would curve back out into that Atlantic Ocean. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with that. Right now that is 7. Tropical Depression 7. Doesn't look too concerning right now, but again, if it goes a little bit further south, that could be something that could potentially have an impact. We'll see how that all is going to shake out, for sure. Looks interesting, and it's nice that things are finally getting a little bit more active in that corner of the world. Hopefully we can avoid any of that hitting land and causing any kind of a natural disaster. We definitely don't want that, and it would be nice if we could get through this hurricane season unscathed with any kind of action. Last call. We're down to the final 90 seconds here this morning. So if anybody else has a question, you can get it in there now. I think Paul just got one more in. Does the MJO control La Nina or El Nino? Yes, there is a correlation with that, especially if the MJO is kind of hanging out in one location, because again, it takes 30 to 60 days for this thing to go around the globe. So if it's hanging out in one location for an extended period of time, that could cut down on your sea surface temperatures. If it's cloudy all the time and the sun isn't able to get through, that could create a body of some cooler water. And over time, if that lingers, that could definitely influence the long-term weather pattern just like that. So great question from Paul. Thanks again for joining us this morning. All right, we're down to the final 30 seconds. That's just enough time for me to wrap things up here. I want to thank you for joining us for this week's episode. We'll be back next week. We'll see what spot in which studio we'll be back in. But we're excited. Coming up later this morning, again, GMQC at 11, right next door, our brand new studio. We will be debuting that with you there. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. Have a good rest of the week if I don't see you later this morning. And I will see you otherwise coming up on the 11. Have a great Wednesday, Quad Cities.